Thank you, Satoru Gojo. Will Sukuna ever fall in love? And the God of Lightning makes his way onto the battlefield. No, not that God of Lightning, this God of Lightning. And is this how you expected Sukuna versus Gojo to go down? So welcome. If you made it this far without getting spoiled, well, Satoru Gojo is dead. A lot of people are saying it's an ass pull. Some people don't appreciate the off-screen death. Hell, some people may think he may have survived, which interestingly enough, there is some merit to it, which we'll discuss later on. But if you're asking my personal gripes with the chapter, it's what Gojo said in Limbo. Is it Limbo? Let's talk about this. So in the beginning of chapter 236, we go straight into a flashback where Teen Gojo is being greeted by Teen Geto. And if you're alarmed by how the chapter starts, well, you should be, because we all know in anime and manga fashion, whenever we see a character go through a flashback in a crazy fight, most likely they're dead, and it seemed like Gege Akutami still reinforced that notion. But regardless, my personal gripe comes from when Gojo tells Geto that Sukuna was a tough opponent, but he reveals that even if Sukuna didn't have Megumi's 10 shadows, he still would have lost, and because of that, he feels sorry for him. He's no stranger to feeling isolated. Prior and during this battle, it's been heavily alluded that Sukuna and Gojo are selfish beings, and because they're both at their respective apex of their game, the thrill of the battle for both of them is something that each of them are desperately yearning for. So both of these combatants bringing out the best in each other, and hell, what the fight was labeled as, the strongest modern sorcerer versus the strongest in history, meant that both fighters will be satisfied. And well, they are satisfied at the end of it. At least Gojo is. But then Gojo says he actually feels remorseful that Sukuna couldn't go all out on him, and even makes this metaphorical analogy with the flower that bloomed, where people can admire a flower, but they can't ask it to understand it, and further implies that he poured everything that he did to make Sukuna understand his physical training, the techniques he mastered, his explosiveness, creative thinking, quick wit, gave it his all, but it wasn't enough to ultimately say that the loneliness that comes with unrivaled strength, the one who will teach you about love, is. Gojo is implying here that Sukuna doesn't feel like that love was reciprocated back. The thrill, the love of the game, which is kind of crazy because throughout all the chapters, hell, even a chapter prior, we learned for the first time, the omnipotent narrator, this isn't Sukuna, the omnipotent narrator says, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Sukuna feels nervous. He feels uneasy. So if Sukuna was holding back, why would he feel uneasy? Not only that, when Sukuna tried to use his domain expansion and it failed, and then Gojo reeled him in and punched him, we even see the omnipotent narrator say, hey, maybe the gift of love that Yorozu was implying is actually right in front of Sukuna, which is Satoru Gojo himself. Not to mention, Gojo knocked out Sukuna with a black flash, and Sukuna shouted at Mahoraga to stop the impromptu hollow purple in chapter 235. So how can you tell me Sukuna wasn't giving it his all? This is a bit contradictory, and this is where I'm feeling the most conflicted about. But that aside, let's go ahead and talk about the copium. People might believe that Sukuna might come back because of what Nanami was saying. So Gojo ends up asking Nanami, how do you feel about your demise? And then Nanami brings up when he asked Mei Mei where he should go and live. Mei Mei responds that if you want to become someone new, you go north, and if you like to return to who you once were, go south. Chapter 236 is called Go South, if you didn't know that, meaning that Gojo is content with who he is and not wanting to become someone new. So maybe there's some implication saying that Gojo is not done with what he has to do back in the present. We even see Gojo bid farewell to everyone here in this flashback, hoping that it isn't a dream, because let's be real, if he was dead, then he should be chilling with everyone there. If Gojo was dead, shouldn't he just be there? Why is he going on this metaphorical airplane if there might be some implications that he's not done with this narrative, even if he's like via some cursed spirit? What I really appreciate what Gege Akutami does with Jujutsu Kaisen is the finality of character's death. That's what makes Nanami's death all the more impactful for me, and the way that Gojo went out, despite it being very visceral, I think it's the most satisfying that you can give someone like Gojo, because much like he said here, he's glad he didn't die of old age or disease. There's a lot of nuances, so we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, the polarizing thing in this chapter is the explanation Sukuna has given to all of us with Mahoraga's adaptation. So we find out in this chapter that Mahoraga's adaptation works the moment Mahoraga Mahoraga receives a single attack and then slowly starts to analyze. Additionally, when it gets more of the same identical attacks, the adaptation accelerates. Okay, makes sense. Once a technique is adapted to the analysis, it doesn't stop there, it continues to adapt further. Sukuna goes on into revealing that Mahoraga was a model and used him basically as a blueprint on how to learn how to tear through infinity. When Mahoraga was first adapting, it was altering the essence of its own curse energy in order to neutralize Gojo's infinity. As Sukuna reveals that it was something he was unable to do, so he waited in the shadows. And that's when that moment when Gojo lost his arm, given the context that we now know, Mahoraga was definitely slicing through space. So when Sukuna said very good, now Sukuna's ability, whatever it is, he was lurking in the shadows, figuring out how he was doing it so Sukuna can finally do it himself, which inevitably he ended up doing here. So in essence, Mahoraga was expanding way beyond Gojo's infinity. It's learning how to cut through space, the entire world, and existence itself. And if it knew how to adapt through all of that, then Gojo's infinity essentially meant nothing. Which is why I find it very contradictory of Gojo saying he feels bad that Sukuna didn't go all out, because Sukuna is literally revealing right here, if it didn't have Mahoraga as a blueprint to model how to tear through the infinity, he wouldn't have been able to do it himself. Or maybe he could have, but it would have been much more difficult. I find it very hard to believe that Sukuna was holding back, but he even goes on into congratulating Satoru Gojo, saying he will never forget about him as a fighter. Now, is cutting through existence and space and time itself gonna be some BS maneuver he's gonna pull on the sorcerers that are alive? Well, yes and no, but I don't think that's a personal gripe people should have, because despite Sukuna now learning how to cut through space and existence itself, there's not a single character in this universe that we know of anyway, besides Gojo, that would have presented that as a challenge for Sukuna. Like, Yuji has some durability and soul swapping techniques that we're going to see. Maki is a physical juggernaut. You get what I'm trying to get at. With no time to mourn, Kashimo gives no fucks about Satoru Gojo as he makes his way down onto the battlefield. And will Kashimo leave his imprint on Sukuna in the way that Gojo did to the King of Curses? My answer is yes. Is it going to eliminate Sukuna? Hell no, that's reserved for Yuji, perhaps even Megumi as well. But we know Gege Akutami likes to base many things off of Hindu and Buddhist mythologies, which I'm sure you're going to see the video sprinkled throughout the week of how Kashimo's ultimate trump card is going to enable Sukuna to act or bring out his weapon that you've seen on the cover page with him having the 4 arms. So pretty exciting stuff until we get the reveal of how Gojo, even with the Black Flash amp, even with the 6 eyes, being able to look at everything, how he was chopped up like a fish on a cutting board. We need to see that POV before I can fully judge how I feel about this fight overall. But yeah, that was the battle. I think in many ways, Gojo's sacrifice was inevitable, something that I don't think anyone should be caught off guard by, but we all thought that Gojo was going to maybe give up his life in exchange to free Megumi. That didn't happen. It seemed like that soul swapping technique or to free Megumi out of Sukuna is going to be done by Yuji himself, and the lack of Sukuna revealing his curse technique or even getting a flashback about Sukuna. I'm curious to know what you guys think, but to see more Jujutsu Kaisen content on this channel, you're going to want to click on this video right here.